deceit. Telling the truth is a revolutionary act. It's the David Knight Show.
As the clock strikes 13, it's Thursday, the 23rd of April, year of our Lord 2026. Well, today we're going to take a look at the massive surveillance state. It keeps metastasizing like a turbo cancer. I wonder who is injecting us with this surveillance state, and what corporations are succeeding, and what are people doing to fight back against it. We have a lot of different lawsuits that are being brought out against one aspect of this that we've talked about before, the flock cameras, but there's something else. Now, besides wearing masks, you're going to have the ICE Gestapo wearing spy glasses. Spy glasses that are going to be hooked up to their databases to put you on an instant watch list, or check to see if you're already on the watch list. But we're going to begin with some updates to this crazy war. We're going to have Tony joining us at the bottom of the hour. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Well, it's kind of interesting. You don't see the American press talking about this. This is what I mean when I say the American press, in spite of all their criticism of Trump, and in many cases the Pentagon in general and war in general, they still pretty much toe the line, in my opinion. They will go with whatever the government has to say about something. We get a one-sided view of this, and as Joel Slinty was saying yesterday, he goes to a lot of sources and a lot of different countries, because understand they deliberately skew the information. They're not going to outright oppose them, especially under the Trump administration. When you look at the situation with the Wall Street Journal, Trump's still pushing this $10 billion lawsuit that against Wall Street Journal, when they accurately reported about this Epstein birthday card thing. Don't offend his ego, or he will shut you down. What do you think he would do against the people who actually were telling you the truth about the war? Well, Trump's blockade, this is coming from the UK. It was originally reported by the Financial Times. Then it was picked up by the Daily Mail. Daily Mail's headline is, the Trump blockade collapses. Collapse, all uppercase. As Iranian ghost ships, quote unquote, bypassed the U.S. Navy during a shaky ceasefire amid uneasy oil prices. So we have shaky ceasefires, we have uneasy oil prices, and we have ghost ships. Should have opened up the show with the Flying Dutchman overture. De Vliegende Hollander, right? So, but anyway, it's a good piece of music, but we were doing that once. You guys really enjoyed that. We went to, we used to take the kids to symphony rehearsals because they were free. And actually, I thought they were more interesting than the actual concert. But anyway, aside from the Flying Dutchman here, we have the Trump blockade, which Mark Levin said, I told him to do that. So we have Mark Levin to thank for this idiotic strategy. I guess he should trademark this. We should call it not the Trump blockade. We should call it the Mark Levin blockade. Give him credit. Credit where credit is way overdue, right? So approximately 34, they talk about these things as being ghost ships. What are they, 3D printed? It takes a while to 3D print a giant tanker holding millions of barrels of oil, right? Approximately 34 Iranian tankers have slipped through the blockade, the Mark Levin trademark blockade, with 19 vessels exiting the Persian Gulf past Trump's Navy, and another 15 ships entering from the Arabian Sea toward Iran. Well, that is, by my calculation here, see if I can do the math, it's 49, right? We're going to talk about math and the illiteracy. I guess it's innumeracy is what you call it. of the Trump administration, of Trump and of RFK Jr. coming up here in a moment. The report follows Iran's seizure of 2 cargo ships on Wednesday morning in the Strait after attacking those vessels, and also a third claiming the ships had failed to comply with the regime's demands. Which regime is that? That would be Iran. But you notice that even though this is coming from the UK, and even though they're telling you something that Fox and CNN don't like to talk about, they still will use the terms these people prefer. You know, we talk about Iran, it's a regime. We talk about Trump, it's an administration. I'm sorry, they're both regimes. There's no administration going on here. Trump's naval blockade of the Strait of Hormuz is unraveling after dozens of Iranian vessels, 49 actually, 4 dozen, plus one, secretly slipped past U.S. surveillance. Isn't that amazing? That's a bit of hope. I mean, if you can, they got some work to do on their surveillance state, perhaps, right? No, actually, they are much further along with the surveillance state of you and of me than they are of giant tankers, evidently. Even as Iran tightened its grip on the critical oil passageway by attacking 3 tankers. So I thought Iran didn't have a navy anymore. You know, and that's another one of these lies. I guess that should be the lie of the day. Their navy is gone and so forth. They never really had a navy, but they're able to interdict these ships. And the U.S. with this giant navy is not. I mean, they're not able to really operate under these conditions in the Strait. It truly is a strait. They don't have much area to maneuver. They don't have a large amount of sea that gives them a bit of a buffer in terms of time to react to these things. Trump announced on Sunday that the U.S. had fired on and disabled and seized an Iranian-flagged cargo ship in the Gulf of Oman. Trump later bragged about the cargo seized by the U.S. aboard the ship. He called it a gift from China. You are nothing but a pirate and a thief, a murderer and a tyrant. I'm sick and tired of the piracy. We have the barbarian pirates now that the U.S. has become. So Iran fired on and takes custody of 2 vessels in the Strait of Hormuz. One of them was Panamanian flagged. The other one was Liberian flagged. Iran also reportedly fired on a 3rd vessel, which was not seized. And so, again, they are able to stop these ships, and the U.S. apparently is not. 49 of them got through. And then we have the situation of the Secretary of the Navy fired. Was he fired because they couldn't stop these ghost ships? Was he fired because he thinks it's suicidal to put U.S. ships in the Strait of Hormuz? Well, you know, when I first looked at that, I thought, the first article, I saw no information as to why he was fired. Then I started seeing statements saying that he had a dispute over Trump's so-called Golden Fleet. This, folks, is something that there should be a dispute over. It is more of a golden fleece, a fleece job on you and I, the American taxpayers, to build a gilded group of battleships in a world in which we have gone to drones and missiles. This is, forget reality, okay? Forget any kind of economic or military reality. This is what Trump wants. He calls it his Trump class. And I think that's appropriate. It's stupid, it's insane, and it is expensive and wasteful. That's what a Trump class battleship is. And so they are now saying that it is a fight over the Trump class battleships. But what I was really surprised to learn is that this guy Phelan was put in as Secretary of the Navy with 0 military experience. No experience in the Navy, no experience in the military. What was his experience? He was a Trump donor. This is like putting Jared Kushner's dad as ambassador to France. He's a white-collar criminal that Trump pardoned.
Only we still had the clips of people sucking up to Trump and his administration. Let's see if you can do better. He's already got great experience for his job, and Trump's regime is to just keep praising Trump as much as possible.
That's right. That's what you need. And if you got some questions about the Golden Fleece battleship class, a Trump class, then you're out, right? And so that's basically what happened with this guy. He's got absolutely no experience. But they put him in as Secretary of the Navy. Does this sum up the Trump regime? I think it does. So the ships engaging Iran in the critical choke point of the Strait of Hormuz. And at first I thought, well, he's probably opposing this insanity. As a matter of fact, we had the guy who was in charge of all the forces around Venezuela, if you remember. It wasn't just the naval forces or air forces or the soldiers or whatever, but it was something like South Command or something like that. I don't know. I don't care. But it was he got out of it because you could see that war crimes are being committed. It was an undeclared war, the way it was being conducted, killing survivors, killing people in boats because you suspected them of being drug dealers. It's like the guy was smart, I think, to get out of it. He hasn't said anything. You ought to write a book about this because the public needs to know. It's not just that he needs to make money. The public needs to know about what the Trump administration is doing. But it's like, I'm not putting my head in that noose. But he hasn't spoken out. So I thought, well, maybe this guy did that. But no, not actually. And this comes after we just had the Army's highest ranking officer, General Randy George, was told to step down and take immediate retirement. We had the guy who was in charge of the Venezuelan, what do we call that? Piracy and Assassination Act. And he got out. And then you have the Secretary of the Army and the Secretary of the Navy have both been fired or resigned, whatever, when you look at this. As one person said, it's not, kind of tells you things are not going well when in the middle of a war, you got the head of the Army and the head of the Navy leave. Yeah, perhaps that's it. No explanation. But here is the most amazing thing about this entire story. He was a Palm Beach, this is Secretary of the Navy, Phelan. He was a Palm Beach-based private equity investor, an art collector. Well, you would think he'd be interested in some of the Trump battleship class, right? Gilded ship. I mean, a work of art that you should be interested in collecting for the Navy, right? So he was a private equity investor, an art collector in Palm Beach, and a major Trump donor who had poured millions of dollars into supporting Trump. He had no prior military or naval experience when he was nominated in 2024, and yet the Senate also confirmed him, right? We don't want to go against Trump. If he wants to put in an art collector with no military experience as head of the Navy, who am I to say no to that, right? Let's just rubber stamp it. And so besides not having any experience, he was also had a lot of conflicts of interest. He had investments in defense contractors like Dell and Palantir, and he went much deeper into contracts with Palantir as well. This is a pattern, isn't it? Just amazing to see the corruption and the insanity and that we have in the Trump administration. It is epic. Epic corruption, not epic fury. But it does make me furious when I look at it because the corruption is so epic. He axed some of the bad programs that Biden had put in, DEI contracts and contracts about climate change and grants. That was worth $300 million, but they promptly turn around and squander it on these golden fleece project that they've got. He deepened the connections with Palantir. In February, reports surfaced that he had flown aboard Jeffrey Epstein's plane in 2006. There we go. Helps to explain this, doesn't it? You look at Trump's connections, right? Just amazing. It's not just the 10, 15 years that he spent with Jeffrey Epstein, but then he's got, the Rothschilds had their hooks into him a long time before any of that stuff, financially, because of his casino bankruptcies. And Wilbur Ross, who famously talked about it, he said, I pulled up, I saw all these people around Trump, And even though he was going there to evaluate shutting down the casinos because of money, he called up the Rothschilds and he said, I think we can work with this guy. I think we can use him, right? So how did they use him? I wonder. And so he becomes the first Commerce Secretary. Then we got Lucky Lutnick, the next door neighbor of Jeffrey Epstein, who was just criticized yesterday by the Senate. They said, you lied to us about your connections with Jeffrey Epstein. We knew you were a next door neighbor, which you said you didn't have any connections with him except one time. And so you're still lying about all this stuff. And so, this is, Lutnick. And then you look at his labor secretary. And that was the guy, Alex Azar, who, was it Acosta? I get the two Alexes confused. It was Alex Azar, I think was the HHS guy, wasn't he? And he was the guy who was the CEO of Eli Lilly. And then Alex Acosta, I think, was the guy who was a U.S. attorney who was the sweetheart prosecutor of Epstein. He was the one who gave him the sweetheart deal and famously said, I was told he was intelligence, Mossad, and CIA, lay off of this guy. So his labor secretary, both of his commerce secretaries, one of them worked for the Rothschilds. And of course, Epstein said, I am an agent of the Rothschilds, as you well know, in one of these correspondences. And Lutnick was his next door neighbor. And Wilbur Ross was a Rothschild guy. And so they're his two commerce secretaries, his labor secretary. And now we've got the guy that had no military experience at all, but except for, I guess, flying Jeffrey Epstein's plane to his island. I guess that's as close as he got to any naval experience.
I mean, you just tell the soldiers who to kill. You don't need actual experience. This guy's perfect. He's an investment banker, Trump donor, and friend of Epstein. What more do you need?
He checks all the boxes. I mean, it's just, and as far as the Republican Senate and House goes, I guess it was the Senate who confirmed him. But as far as the Republicans go, all he needs is Trump's recommendation, and they don't look any further than that. So who's taking his place? A guy named Hung Chau, or Cao, I guess, CAO. I don't think there's any H in that. He is a naval captain. Now, he does have military experience, but he's also a politician. When you look at these generals in the Pentagon, they're all politicians. They're all politicians. They may have military experience, they may not, but they do have political experience, or they wouldn't be in that position. It is very political. And we have, I forget how many times more, something like 10 times the number of generals now that we had and high-ranking officers that we had during World War II. It simply is politics. But this guy who's taking his place, Hung Cao, was a Naval Academy graduate, a decorated combat veteran. He fled Vietnam as a child refugee. He later balanced Navy budgets at the Pentagon. Wait a minute. We balanced a budget at the Pentagon? Was that before or after they flew the plane into the building that was auditing the missing trillions of dollars? I don't know. Maybe there's a little bit of help from that. But that's probably the most amazing thing on his resume, if true. If he balanced a budget at the Pentagon. He has been deployed multiple times. He ran for Senate in Virginia with Trump's endorsement. So there you go. Like I said, they're all politicians. They may or may not have military experience. Fortunately, this guy does have military experience. Unfortunately, he will do whatever Trump tells him. The guy who had bone spurs couldn't go to Vietnam. I wonder what he thinks about that. Does he endorse Trump's dodge of going to Vietnam with an absurd alibi that's there? But as I point out, it's not going too well when the heads of your different organizations are leaving here. Well, when we look at what is happening in the Trump administration, to say that it is erratic is an understatement. And of course, we just had another insider trade, big one, that happened yesterday. We had the really big one that happened, based on Trump's constantly changing lies. And so this is one report that came out. This is about, and I don't know if this is true or not. I've only seen this reported in one particular place, but I thought it was amazing enough, why not report it? I mean, if we're going to report what Trump says, why not? All bets are off. We don't have to do any factual checking anymore. Nobody does any factual checking before they talk about what Trump says. So why not talk about this rumor?
They recognize they've got some problems. They got to try to deal with it. And then there was a report out that they had an emergency meeting Saturday night. And apparently, well, one report coming out of that meeting at the White House is that Trump wanted to use the nuclear codes, and General Dan Kane stood up and said no. He invoked his privilege as the head of the military, so to speak. It was apparently quite a blow up. There are pictures of Kane coming out of that meeting with his head down to the ground. So, you know, there's some very, very bizarre things going on in D.C.
Well, on Saturday night, excuse me, Larry, Trump.
Yeah, I don't know what happened at the end of that video. Anyway, he was a guest on Judge Napolitano. He's a former CIA guy, so you take all that into consideration. However, when we look at our government and the insane wars, I think there's nothing more insane than this particular war, this bioweapon war that's conducted for basically my entire lifetime. It began before I was born here in America. And I'm not talking about the COVID shots. I'm talking about Lyme disease. And documents have been gradually coming out about this. And it was all put together in an article by Robert Malone that you can find on LifeSite News as well. An investigation based on declassified government documents and some whistleblowers who are nearing end of life and want to clear the deck. Previously suppressed scientific research has discovered compelling evidence that U.S. biological weapons programs contributed to the emergence of Lyme disease, which now affects hundreds of thousands of Americans annually. We've known this for the longest time. I mean, you just draw a circle around Plum Island. You look at all the Lyme disease cases and how they have spread out. And, it's just like this concentric expanding circle with Plum Island at the center of it. So we've known all this stuff for the longest time. Now, just like with the COVID stuff, some people are coming out and saying, yeah, here's some of the documents about it as well. And so whether or not we had the documentary proof, we already knew this. But I think what is truly amazing is, as he puts it in this article, a pattern of concealment spanning 6 decades, including the systematic suppression of critical medical research and the release of nearly 300,000 radioactive ticks across Virginia. Our government is insane, criminally insane, satanically insane. This is somehow supposed to protect us? This is national security? And in this report, as part of Operation Mongoose, the Kennedy administration's efforts to destabilize the Fidel Castro regime, one guy who has talked about his experience said that he's now in his 70s. He told researchers, he said the strangest thing he ever did was to drop infected ticks on Cuban sugarcane workers. Did a bombing run with ticks. It's like the joke, polyticks, many blood-sucking parasites. That's really what politics is. Using C-123 transport aircraft flying nighttime missions, he said almost skimming the surface of the Caribbean to avoid Cuban radar. After returning from Cuba, his 4-month-old son developed life-threatening fever requiring emergency surgery. His CIA commander advised him to, quote, burn all the clothes you took to Cuba, burn everything. So he says, well, that indicated that he thinks that it's all contaminated, right? How insane is this?
Yeah, it was the strangest thing I ever did. I dropped a whole bunch of biological weapons on innocent civilians. That was so weird. I also infected my son. It was strange.
Yeah, exactly. And further on in this, they say that as they've been lying and stonewalling about this and covering it up, and then when some of this stuff comes out, they go, well, that was all done defensively. No, you don't drop disease-laden ticks on people defensively. Sorry.
It was a deterrent in case, 50 years later or more, it would be revealed that they were the ones responsible, and that would have a chilling effect on communism.
Yeah, the thing about all this stuff, and again, the radioactive ones that they released in the United States around Virginia, they wanted to do that, they said, because it made them radioactive so they could track them with Geiger counters. This sounds like the InfoWars thing, trying to detect Fukushima radiation on the coast of California. But
not to mention what happens when you get bitten by a radioactive tick. I would imagine that
you turn into Spider-Man.
Yeah, tick man. Yeah. I imagine that's some amount of cancer risk there.
Yeah, who knows? But just the harebrained insanity, criminality, and this is Nazi level stuff, folks. It really is. And there was an interesting book by Annie Jacobson years ago that I read. I don't think I interviewed her on that one. I think I interviewed her on something other than that. But she has an excellent voice too, by the way. If you want to get the audiobook, it's just a very pleasant voice to listen to. But she went into all this stuff about DARPA and actually she did a book on DARPA. I might be conflating the two. I think there was another one that was on the bioweapons and stuff. But anyway, the bottom line is they go into all of this dark stuff. They built our biological warfare unit by bringing in these war criminals from Nazi Germany and from Japan, people that had experimented on Jews and on retarded people and on American soldiers. And they brought them in because they wanted to know what they had found out. And then they put them in charge of our nuclear, biological, chemical weapons programs, not the nuclear necessarily, but the biological and chemical, bringing them into Fort Detrick and other places. And they would put an American at the very top, but the person who was really in charge was the person that was like 1 or 2 levels down. And these are the war criminals that they brought in as part of Operation Paperclip. And so, in the course of the book, as she's talking about it, all the truth is now eventually coming out. And what she says is, well, of course, you'd never be able to do this today. We have changed everything now. So this would never happen again today. And you see that in this article as well. So the 2 tick experts consulted about these releases said they were aghast. And they said, you'd never be able to do that today, right? Let me ask you a question. Is our government more sane and less evil than it was in the 1950s? What do you think? I think that what you would find is that nobody would tell you what was really happening with this stuff.
Man, forcing a whole bunch of people to have a experimental thing injected into them, you could never do that today.
That's right. What they did, the first one of these was in 1954, year before I was born. They called it Operation Big Itch, and they released 670,000 fleas from cluster bombs. Flee for your life. So they wanted to prove that the fleas could survive aerial deployment. And again, they've experimented on Americans over and over again. As Lance pointed out, the Operation Warp Speed was one gigantic experiment. That was your red flag right there, even if you didn't want to dig any further. So they had 134 scheduled tests between 1962 and 1974. Of course, the Big Itch happened in 1954. I guess about the same time that Marilyn Monroe was doing the 7-year itch, they did the Big Itch that was at the Pentagon. So they had facilities that are capable of producing 100 million infected mosquitoes monthly. You think this started with Bill Gates? No. 50 million fleas a week. Well, again, if you want to look for parasites and pests, you have to look no further than the U.S. government. That's the bottom line with this stuff. We can laugh about it, but when you look at these diseases like Lyme disease, Rocky Mountain spotted tick fever, now there's a meat allergy that they are working on spreading that by ticks because they don't want you having any meat. That's one way to do it. If they just tell you can't have any meat, well, it gets people angry. But if they give you an allergy so that you can't eat it, well, things like that happen. So 1968, the first Eastern U.S. human babesiosis cases appeared in Nantucket. I have no idea how to pronounce that name or what that is. Actually, I should have looked it up. Sorry. But a lot of this stuff was happening up around Long Island. 1968, Rocky Mountain spotted fever appeared in the Cape Cod region. 1970, hundreds of Rocky Mountain spotted fever cases documented on Long Island. 1972, first 51 documented Lyme arthritis cases in Old Lyme, Connecticut, and a ground zero. By the 1990s, the eastern end of Long Island had by far the greatest concentration of Lyme disease, according to one analysis. If you drew a circle around the area of the world heavily impacted by Lyme disease, the center of that circle is Plum Island. We've known this for a long time. So they did a video testimony and some documentaries going back to 2013. One guy talked to them, and they said after the camera stopped, he looked at them with a smile and said, "I didn't tell you everything." Then they said, try as much as we couldn't get him to say anything more. And before his death in 2014, he left a note that said, "I wondered why somebody didn't do something." Well, maybe that somebody would have been you. I wonder why nobody does anything about this stuff. It's just amazing to me. And like Lance said, the biggest one of these experiments, again, is what Trump did. And people voted for him. And the most amazing thing is the people who hated the vaccine the most were his biggest supporters. How did that happen? Alex Jones, that's how it happened. Just amazing. So they denied this for 50 years. They suppressed, they classified, they resisted investigation. This is our government. It's been evil for a long time. It's just they don't even try to hide it anymore. They know there's not going to be any consequences for the things that they do. And that's where we are. Do we have Tony yet?
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, I'm going to take a quick break, and we're going to come back and we're going to talk to Tony about the crazy economics. It's kind of nothing compares to this stuff, but the economics are crazy as well. And they want to make America that became prosperous because of freedom. They want to make us poor because of national security and other nonsense like that. We'll be right back.
You're listening to The David Knight Show.
Elvis.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Beatles.
And the sweet sounds of Motown. Find them on the Oldies channel at apsradio.com.
All right, joining us now is Tony Arterburn of Wise Wolf Gold, and you can go to davidknight.gold, and that'll take you directly to Tony Arterburn. You can sign up for Wolfpack. It's a way to dollar cost average your gold and silver, what do we call it, stash? So you can gradually start to accumulate it and average that cost out, and it's a great way to save. Save in a currency, in real money, not in fiat currency. And so we're going to begin with something that Tony has talked about many times, but we got some new data about it, and that is the growth of the money supply. It is exploding, folks, and Tony has talked about how it has exploded over the last few years since the what they call, I guess, the Great Recession, but the real estate issue and the banking issue that happened there. But it is really being stoked right now by the Trump administration. And they have, this is an article from Mises, they have a metric that was created by Murray Rothbard and another person, and they feel like it's a more accurate measurement of the M2 money supply than what the government provides. And I would be inclined to believe that, since the government usually lies to us about the inflation rate, lies to us about unemployment, lies to us about everything. Why wouldn't they lie to us about the money supply as well? And so they said the Fed has cut their target interest rate by 175 basis points, and they returned now to quantitative easing. And so when you look at this, everybody focuses on the interest rates, and that's something that is very visible. And of course, it has a direct impact on the government's budget because of the interest charges on this massive debt that Trump has accumulated. So he's very focused on that as well. But kind of the quiet thing that's happening under the surface is this quantitative easing, and it is growing by leaps and bounds. Yeah, and it's kind of interesting to hear. They point out in the article, Powell, the chair of the Fed right now, has used all kinds of variations about the word restrictive. And they said there's nothing restrictive about this at all. He's called it, their policies on quantitative easing and stuff, he's called it borderline restrictive, modestly restrictive, relatively restrictive, and clearly restrictive. I would say, Tony, that it is wildly permissive. It is lenient. I would even call it indulgent. What do you think?
Well, if you go back to when you and I first started talking, and this was the last quarter of 2019, it's a very important time in history because you're right. It's not just about the interest rates. It's not just about liquidity in the open sense. It's about currency creation and the expansion of the money supply, I think, on balance sheets that we don't see. It's funny. The people that bring you're talking about Plum Island, Lyme disease, the Tuskegee experiments, nuclear weapons, napalm, they're not lying to you. They would never lie to you. All these numbers are correct. The employment numbers are correct. The CPI data is correct. Yeah, whatever. I think the true metrics we don't know. I mean, when you and I started talking, they were injecting like the GDP of like South Korea in 1 month into the overnights, into the repo markets. And it was, I read an article at the end of 2019, David, and I don't know if it's correct. It was some independent journalism, but they estimated that it was $6 trillion in new currency creation just to float those overnights, just to continue the background noise of everything that goes on in this very complex, a very rigged financial system. And when you and I spoke last week, I think these are metrics that people need to start wrapping their head around. It's there's the economy, there's gross domestic product, there's things that we make. And then if you look at the world market, though, what's different than it was 45, 46 years ago is that there's about 60 times more currency on Earth, or maybe more, because it's, you look at the GDP of the world, it's like 126 trillion or something. But if you look at the world financial products, it's 800 trillion. Those financial products are currency.
Yeah.
So it's all built off, and it's based off nothing. And that's the thing that's not sustainable.
Yeah. That's just amazing. I remember when we were first talking about this, and I saw all this massive money that was going into the repo market, and I thought, repo market? They're spending that much money on cars? I had to look this thing up, and it's like you said, it was the first time I looked at it, it was equivalent to the entire gross domestic product of Puerto Rico. Right. And then after a couple of weeks, it was as much as the entire GDP of Switzerland, one of the top 20 economies in the world. And at that point, it's like, whoa, this is insane. We started talking about it a lot. You talked about it. We had Gerald Celente talking about it. It was insane. I didn't know what the repo market was, but when you're throwing that much cash around, it's not a good thing. That's the bottom line, right?
And it's not like it was to build infrastructure or to create something. It was literally just to make sure that these entities cleared checks. I mean, at the end of the day, that's the logic, is to clear to keep liquid all these entities. And that led into, what's interesting about that last quarter was that led into COVID 1984. That was the last quarter of 2019. And it was the largest exodus of CEOs in history at the same time. You know, all that Intel and multinationals, they flow together, but it really had to do with the massive increase of the money supply, which I think COVID and that whole operation had something to do with the creation of an expansion of the money supply.
And they continued to expand it through the COVID. They call it here the COVID era. I think it should be spelled ERROR. But here's some numbers for you. In February, the total money supply again rose, heading above $20.4 trillion and growing by $1 trillion in just 7 months from July of last year to February of this year. Although the total money supply fell throughout much of 2023 and 2024, it has nevertheless increased by $1.6 trillion since that time. And it's now only $0.5 trillion below the COVID era peak. So it is growing by leaps and bounds under Donald Trump. And this is something that nobody really pays much attention to. Again, everybody's focused on the interest rates because of houses and things like that. So we laser focus on that. But they're doing this under the radar and nobody is really paying much attention to it. As they point out, M2 is now at the highest level it's ever been, topping out at $22.5 trillion. And I said since 2009, which is when you typically start talking about how they started ramping up the money supply, the money supply is now up by more than 206%. Nearly 30% of that has been created since January of 2020, because Trump did a huge number on us with that as well. The universal basic income, increasing the money supply and all the rest of the stuff, like breaking the supply chain. Just look at all the economic stuff they did, let alone, all of the health effects of this bioweapon.
Well, it's turning America into the Taj Mahal casino. And it's funny. How do you bankrupt a casino? And that's even more interesting. How do you bankrupt the United States of America? I mean, there's so many things that should be. If you want to know, like, you want to lean into this is all an operation or this is a conspiracy against the American people, we have so many opportunities right now. We actually should be building things, and there should be a lot of wealth and prosperity going around, but there's not. And that should give you the tell, because I think there's a lot of spirit still left in this country for building and innovation, and there's technology. We should be very wealthy right now, but we're not, and that's because of the leadership and people that can bankrupt a casino can bankrupt the United States of America, unfortunately. And I want to talk a minute about going back to 2008, 2009. Recently, Hank Paulson, who was Secretary of the Treasury under Bush during the great financial crisis of 08, 09, he came out recently and said, the United States needs to start forming a plan, kind of a break glass in case of emergency plan, a financial plan.
Break the Glass-Steagall plan.
Right. Glass-Steagall. This is what they did back in 08, 09. And it's funny because I was thinking of him the other day. He went and got on his knees in front of Nancy Pelosi. This is Hank Paulson, Secretary of the Treasury, and he begged her, for $750 billion. And this was for TARP funds, the troubled asset relief funds that they were going to put out to bail out these banks that had gotten underwater from all the subprime stuff. But think of those numbers. You had George W. Bush in office. He's on his way out, but he said, this sucker's going down. He's talking about the American economy. What they need, and they were, and David, they were breaking their necks to get $750 billion out of Congress. You don't need that there's no Hank Paulson moment now. They just make it. There's been some change and shift, right? Because you can just look at the sheer numbers of it. The debt of the U.S., compared to then, everything seems quaint. These numbers seem quaint. We would have $750 billion is nothing. And that was a big deal in 08, 09. And this had never happened before. We'd never had that sort of intervention with the Fed. I mean, there's been manipulation. They've controlled the money supply since 1913, but there's never been that sort of intervention. So the wheels are off all of that. Where this ends up with no fiscal responsibility in numbers that aren't even real. I mean, do we think that the debt of the U.S. is real? Like, if the money's not real, and the whole Fed is built off of the system itself is rigged. It's like a snake eating its own tail.
Yeah.
You can't. In order to pay off the debt, you'd have to create new currency to pay the debt off, which creates new debt. So the whole thing is rigged against us, and I don't think any of it's real anyway. But if you're basing the economy off of the dollar, which we do, and there's no other alternative, then you're in some real trouble when you start. In this, the Mises is correct. I mean, and the money supply expansion only is going to create chaos, and it's going to create inflation, and it's going to put us in a position where, unlike Hank Paulson in 0809, I don't care if you have a break glass plan. If you got these numbers are so large that you can't really bail yourself out of them. Yeah. It's not like that time in history. There's nowhere left to borrow from. Look who's buying treasuries. Nobody. Maybe stablecoin producers, but China's dumping them. The world's dumping the dollar. So this isn't like the 0809 crisis. It's not going to be like that.
Well, when I look at it, the way I think of this whole thing is it's like Thelma and Louise driving us over the cliff. Both of them wanting to go as fast as they can, and that's the Democrats and Republicans. Thelma and Louise. We're kind of the Brad Pitt characters. Like, get me out of this car,
Let's just keep going. Let's keep driving. That's what they said at the end. That's what both these parties will do. Absolutely. Just keep driving off the cliff.
That's right. Well, HSBC and their analysis says fiscal risks and stagflation fears will support gold prices even without Fed rate cuts. And so they're looking at the fundamentals, the fiscal deficits, the geopolitical risk, and continued central bank buying will support higher prices, according to HSBC. They said, we're looking at what has happened. A lot of this, as we've said, they're saying the same thing. A lot of this is the fact that people are having to cash out of their gold position, even some of the central banks, because the countries are looking at what Trump has created is a world war economically, at the very least. Gold did not act as a straightforward geopolitical hedge, as investors sold bullion to raise liquidity while the U.S. dollar absorbed most of the safe haven demand. And I look at this and it's like, so how is the dollar a safe haven? But when you look at what's going on in the market, Tony, these people hang on every word that this liar Trump tells them. It doesn't matter how ridiculous it is. And he and people in his administration are playing the market. They put out some statement about, well, the war's ended now and everything is great. And then, a couple of minutes later, boom, these guys have, 15 minutes before he says that, they make major investments in there, and then immediately the market reacts to it. These people take their profits, and then he comes out and he tells people the truth, right? So it's all a game with these people.
Well, the world is going back to gold. That's the world reserve currencies being reset right now. Mm-hmm. So there's going to be some volatility and some chaos. I think gold did its job in the last 30 days or so, going back to when the war really kicked off. I mean, gold hit $5,300 an ounce, and then there was some sell-off because these countries and entities got into oil. I mean, Turkey sold, like, what was it, $56 billion worth of gold. And then, of course, they're buying, energy with it. I mean, that's a functionality of money. And so that's going to happen. But, it's funny. You go look at, I read an article the other day, Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley. They used to have, and this is up until very recently, they'd say for allocations on portfolios, they'd say 60% stocks, 40% bonds. Now they've both changed to 40% stocks, 20% bonds, 20% gold. 20%. Wow. That's both of those entities have changed. And this is recent. That's because of what's happening with the rest of the world. And it's quiet. And you're not going to get this from mainstream media outlets. They're not going to tell you that the dollar's on its way out, is that the whole world monetary system is being upended. They're not going to tell you about that. That's right. This is to the last minute. The elite will hold out. The powers that be will leave you holding the bag. But the rest of the world is moving away. I think that's the key indicator. And the FUD and other things, they'll look towards, oh, see, gold didn't hold up in a crisis. Well, my goodness, 2 years ago, gold was half of what it is now.
That's right. Yeah.
What do you mean it didn't hold up? It's been holding up in this whole crisis as we go into the Great Reset.
Well, there was an article, and it was on, I forget now who, I think it's one of the mainstream press places like Wall Street Journal or something, but it was a woman who said, is this the end of the petrodollar? No, petrodollar is actually going to be strengthened from this war. I thought, what? And so I didn't cover it here on the show really because it was just so off the wall stupid. Her fundamental premise was that it's going to be strengthened because we're winning this war. And it's like, okay, I've had enough. I'm out of this article right there. If you can't see what is happening with all this stuff, and when you look at Trump, the constant, we're in, we're out, we're this and that, the constant volatility of what he's saying, the lies and the back and forth, clearly he's desperate. And clearly we're not winning this thing. So if you're going to tell me that we're winning this, that it's not a quagmire, that it's going to soon be over and we're going to come out as the top dog on all this stuff, you really don't know what you're talking about. And so that's just one aspect of this. But when you look at the long-term aspect of this, of course, the petrodollar is not getting strengthened by this. The American empire is not getting strengthened by this. This is going to harm even the military-industrial complex because people want to look at it and they're going to say, well, I'm not really sure that we need to have your expensive weapon systems.
Well, you were speaking earlier about the Secretary of the Navy, and it reminded me we had one of those guys that didn't actually serve in the military. That was Franklin Roosevelt.
Yeah,
that didn't turn out too well.
No, yeah,
we certainly, and this is all about leadership too, David. I mean, at the end of the day, and what do you get when you cross MK Ultra with Operation Mockingbird? You get these people. Like that lady is talking about, well, this is going to boost the petrodollar. I hear so many commentators. I don't know where they find these people that are talking about, well, this was an emergency. We had to go out and take out Iran's capabilities. We cannot have a nuclear armed Iran. This is very dangerous. And these are people who are showing up on financial shows. Mm-hmm. I'm like, you really believe that? And you can balance a checkbook? You have an inherent authority on money and you really believe this? This is something.
If you want to get worried about a state with nuclear weapons, worry about Israel. It's they're the ones attacking everybody, and
imagine having that worldview.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty stale and warped, by the way. So I think the smart money is on what's happening with the rest of the world. I mean, this is geopolitically, you can see the shift happening. One of the big indicators I thought was a great story and kind of one of those dark horse stories that I always look at the periphery of things. The fastest growing sector in blockchain is gold-backed, gold-backed blockchain tokenization of gold. Mm-hmm. And you can. I'm not a fan of these stable coins. You can freeze. There's a reason that Iran is not using Tether and other things. They're not using stable coins for their tolls in the Strait of Hormuz. They use Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Because you can freeze, you can, not can't necessarily take the assets off the blockchain, but you can take those accounts and you can freeze them up. Mm-hmm. At least that's the way I understand them. But that still is the fastest growing. It's because slowly, and it's not going to happen overnight. Maybe it'd be one of those gradually, suddenly things. But right now, it's slowly. You see, the world is turning away from the dollar.
Yeah.
And petrodollar. I mean, that's antiquated. We don't have a petrodollar anymore. That time is gone. Regardless of what, and there are people that come out and say this is some sort of strategy on behalf of this, the brilliant Trump administration that we're going to start exporting American energy because we blocked up the Strait of Hormuz. That's like Vietnam. We had to destroy the village in order to save it. I mean, that makes no sense. Even if that is true, that makes no sense that we would do it this way.
Well, when you look at it, whenever you throw a monkey wrench in the supply chain and you do it, it's not going to help. It may help some American companies that are here in the U.S. And may help their bottom line, which is really all that Trump cares about. But as far as you or I, we're going to have to be competing on the open market for oil and gas with people who live in India, for example, right? Because it is a global market. And as that Chevron CEO said the other day, he said, hey, it's a global market. So if people in India are desperate and they're going to pay more money for their oil and gas, you're going to pay more money. You're competing with everybody in the world as a consumer. Now, the producers who are based in America, they can make a lot of money. And Trump doesn't care what happens to average Americans. He doesn't care what happens to small businesses. That's not his concern. He's just like Hillary Clinton, who said, I can't be concerned when she's talking about imposing healthcare costs on people. I can't be concerned with these undercapitalized small businesses. So if you don't have enough money, forget about it. And you can go back and look at, as I've talked about, the OPEC oil embargo, look at how it sent a shock through our economy, but throughout the global economy. And it was only directed at the United States. And it was a small percentage of our total imports, our total consumption of oil at the time. So it only mattered about 15% of our oil. And what did we do? We went on the open market, and it created a problem with it. So Trump is like this toddler. He's got this, I want that thing over there, and I don't care what the secondary, tertiary effects are. I don't see anything except that thing over there that I want. So he's going to put tariffs on, and it's going to shut down the aluminum and the copper and things like that people need. The rare earths that they need for their military equipment, they don't think about those secondary, tertiary effects. I want to have this thing out here. And the goals that he's got are absolutely crazy as well. But this article also from Mises says Trump is driving gold crazy along with the rest of the world. He's making the entire world crazy. He may not have hit that red nuclear button on his desk, but he really has nuked the global economy, hasn't he?
Yeah, I think people forget where gold was, just 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. Think of where it is now. I mean, even in the interim, like I recall 2022, last quarter, you could buy an ounce of gold for $1,600.
That's right.
In 2022.
Yeah.
That's just insane to me, given everything that we're seeing right now. And more instability will continue to drive, because this prosperity in markets feed on certainty. We're giving them no certainty. And that's why a lot of the funds end up in gold. Now, the problem with having a market that's in the doldrums and it doesn't know itself and doesn't know where it's going and can't plan and can't allocate is that you'll have volatility in that. And sometimes when the market goes down, gold goes with it. But this is part of the growing pains, I think, to get to the point where, gold retakes the helm officially as the world's reserve currency, or some system based off gold. Yeah. Who knows where that takes this number? But clearly, we don't want to be the world's reserve currency anymore. We don't want to be the world's leader anymore. We just want to act like a toddler, like you said. I mean, if there's no doubt in my mind that we could become number one again if we, drop things like the corporate income tax or the personal income tax. Like, you can make it give incentives, and we could do that. By the way, if we can do that with an executive order, certainly we could. We could make it a tax-free zones in this country. We could do something. That would be the tell. That would be the tell that we want to compete in the world, and we want to give certainty. There would be some trade deals. You don't reset the energy system by creating scarcity.
Yes,
that's right. Not. Right. There's so many unknowns in that. So no, this is a part of the Great Reset. This is a part of.
It's deliberate taking us down. Yeah, it's deliberately taking us down. Absolutely is. And when we look at this. As Mises is talking about this, the fluctuation, the variation that we're seeing in the gold price that you're talking about, again, this is the market reacting to things, just like the market reacts to Trump's pronouncements about the war that are obviously fake. And so they're reacting to this other stuff that he's doing, and he's doing it just to manipulate the market. Insider trading that's happening here. So again, you have to look at the real fundamentals that are there. As they point out, despite the tactical weakness that you might think about gold, that's in terms of short term, what's happened in the last couple of months, the context is high debt, high inflation, low real benchmark interest rates that are continuing to support gold in the medium and the long term as the ultimate safe haven. That's Mises. Because the rest of this stuff is just manipulation and lies that's causing a lot of volatility on this stuff. These people are gaming the system. They really are. But
you're right. The whole, I mean, so much of our economy is built off of that. Like the poly market bets and all this insider trading stuff. It truly is disgusting. I mean, that didn't build anything, but these guys, they make money, kind of like the character of Gordon Gekko on Wall Street in the Oliver Stone's film in the 80s, he's like, there's a direct quote from Gordon Gekko, and I remember it. It says, "I create nothing, I own." I create nothing. So that's the thing, is there's create nothing. You just own stuff. And I think there's going to be a real sea change here as we careen into the rest of this great reset decade into 2030. There'll be a lot of changes. And I think there'll be, I don't wish for it, but a lot of austerity. There's going to be a lot of things happen. And some of these big companies and these masters of the universe, they're going to get caught flat footed, I think, because they're basing this off an old paradigm. And that's going to be changing quickly. So those who, I think, are just slow and steady, preparing for what's next, making sure you're outside the system, these are the smart moves in my opinion. Maybe it's not as sexy, maybe it's not, but when you can have something that's counterparty risk averse, like gold or silver or something outside the system, I think you're going to fare a lot. I don't want to be in this system. I don't want to be in this market.
This system is like a casino. It really is. And why not? I mean, we got Trump as the former casino owner who's there. He has been bought and paid for by another casino owner, Miriam Adelson. She was more successful, so she could buy him. And her husband was anyway, Sheldon Adelson. And I was just talking about this the other day, Tony. Forbes, even in reporting this tragedy in Shreveport, Louisiana, where some guy murdered 8 people or something, most of them children, in 3 different locations. And at the bottom of the story, Forbes has a thing where you can place a bet on the odds of of gun control now based on that particular story. So they just game everything. It's a gamification of our society. So Trump, I guess, is really the perfect person for us. Since everything is a casino, everything is a game, I guess this is the guy that we should have. He reflects our society, doesn't he?
I think in so many ways it does. I mean, and you look at just the entire administration. I mean, I look at Kash Patel, and I saw that. I mean, we're just an unserious country.
We're
just an unserious country. You have probably some of the most heinous crimes ever committed against humanity going on right now in the United States, going on internationally, but even we see through the Epstein files. That's just the tip of the iceberg, and it's going on. And you have this unserious buffoon, like Kash Patel. That's America to me. Yeah. He makes me, honestly, David, I probably should have stopped a long time ago. He makes me never want to have alcohol ever again. Like when I look at Kash Patel, I'm like, I don't know if maybe I should stop having a beer. Like I don't know, like just anything him chugging those beers with the hockey team. I thought that's. Yeah. And he had to fly over there,
private jet with these, and he takes this jet and he goes, it's the corruption, it's the party atmosphere. You look at people like him, you look at Pete Keg's breath, and when you look at, Kristi Noem, the cosplay chief of Homeland Security and all the rest of the stuff. Meanwhile, she's also got a scam that she's running on the side. That's the other thing about these people. Not only are they cartoon character corrupt figures, and, drunken partiers, but they're also corrupt, as you can imagine. And that's really a reflection of Trump. That's who he is. Why wouldn't he have people like that around him?
Yeah, it's just an unserious thing. And it's just grifting of the highest order. And these people are just looting the treasury. There is a feel, I think, if you're reading between the lines, it's kind of like the senioritis of high schoolers, like we're not going to be here, and then maybe this is like there's some sort of end of things. I mean, we just let this run out. Nobody's talking about the fundamentals that should be able to put the country back on track, and we'd have to be having fiscal responsibility conversations. We'd have to talk about bringing troops home. We'd have to reallocate military spending. Nobody's talking. We're just ramping everything up. So it's been doubled down on, David. I don't think it's going to end well.
Well, all we can do is try to play it rationally and try to keep it real on our side as this is all just careening off into the absurd. But tell us a little bit about what's going on at Wise Wolf. Anything new?
Well, I do have something new, and it's not official yet. Your listeners will be the first people to hear about it. But given the fact that the economy is in the shape that it's in, and I understand, like I have a lot of people, we maintain about, I think we have close to 1,400 active members on Wolfpack, which that's, all across the country. It's a small number, but it's around the clock we work to fill the orders. But I think when I was looking at the other day, I was looking at some of the affiliate stuff, and I said, you know what? I'm going to open that up to anybody. So if you want to be an affiliate, we pay a point. We pay 1% on anything that, like, if you want to share the link with friends and family or whatever, you want to make a little extra money. I'm going to open that up. It's not official yet, so you'd have to go through davidknight.gold and just email my crew and talk to me about it. But it's easy. You just fill out a form. It's one page. You fill out something. And then every month we look at the sale. You'll get notified when it happens too. But that's how we're handling a lot of the affiliates. I thought I'd offer that because we're hearing from people all around the country about gas prices, food prices, unknowns. They're having to cut back or change their membership or whatever. And I get that. It's the reason I created that in the first place. It's for regular people. I was on a show yesterday and I said, it's for normal people. That the big gold and silver companies, it's not that they're indifferent to people with a smaller budget. They're just not built into their plan. Like they're not talking to people with $500 or $50. That's just not how they do business. It's not what they're built for, but we are. So I thought I'd offer that up, and you can get your own individual link. So it's kind of like your own franchise. You can in real time see, pass it around. You can post it on social media, whatever you want to do. And that's one of the things that, we bought, like davidknight.gold. You can get your own, invest in your own .gold. That's a good investment, by the way. I own Tony.gold, which I didn't think that I would be able to get. But that's a good thing to do. And we have that available for folks who want to make a little extra income.
That's great.
So I thought I'd pass that along. I mean, nothing's much changed on the metals markets for right now. It's just supply, and we've been able to raise our buying percentages a bit. Thank goodness. I had to keep them low for so long. It was hard to offload some of this stuff.
Yeah. Well, it has kind of stabilized now, hasn't it?
Yes, thank goodness. Like it was, I could tell you the mental gymnastics that I was having to do I don't, this whole past like 4 months or 5 months, I'm looking back and I'm like, well, wait, that was December? I was, my brain, like just turning over, like you mentioned, I'm living in hyperinflation, trying to contain it. But I had such a good team, and we fared very well given all the volatility. So we were past that. And so now I'm just looking at projects. We redid the wolfpack.gold website. So we made some updates to it. And the affiliate program is on the David Knight Show. You heard it here first. It's unofficially open. So give me a shout out if you want something to happen on that front. We'll send you a form.
And you were able to navigate through the jump to hyperspace that we had. Kind of when I think about what happened the last couple of months, you just said it's really kind of just been a nightmare, and it really is like Star Wars jumping into hyperspace. What happened in the gold and silver market?
We went to ludicrous speed, like Spaceballs.
It was a ludicrous market. Yeah, that's right.
It's ludicrous.
But the reality is, the context of all this stuff. And the reality is the context that they've been putting in now for 15 years or better. So that's what's really going on. And the final ending of all this stuff is really baked in. We know how this is going to end. We just don't know the timing, the exact timing of this. What Gerald Celente always talks about. He says, "Well, I don't make predictions, but I identify trends." And so we can't say exactly when this is or that is going to happen, but we know that it has to happen because we see what the fundamentals are that are there. Well, it's always great talking to you, Tony. And you got a program following this one today?
Yes, sir. Arterburn Radio transmission. My Thursday show. It's you can go to Rumble at America Unplugged channel or my X at Tony Arterburn. I'll be live there. Okay. And just do an hour, and we'll see what I can dig into today. A little parapolitics, precious metals. Always a fun time.
All right, great. Well, we're going to move on to some. We were talking about Plum Island. We're going to get back to some of that
Good.
stuff. It's just insane to me what our government is doing and how criminal it is. And they're ramping up the surveillance state to a ludicrous speed, as we should say.
That's right.
So we're going to talk about that when we come back, folks. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Thank you so much for joining us, Tony.
Thank you, sir.
Have a good one.
You too.
Using free speech to free minds. It's the David Knight Show.
If you like the Eagles,
On a dark desert highway,
the Cars, and Huey Lewis in the News,
they say the heart of rock and roll is still beating.
you'll love the Classic Hits channel at APS Radio. Download our app or listen now at apsradio.com.
My fellow Americans, today I have the tremendous honor of announcing my lie of the day. This lie is the biggest and most beautiful lie you've ever heard. Believe me.
There's two ways of calculating percentage. If you have a $600 truck and you reduce it to 10, that's a 600% reduction.
We have the best lies. Nobody lies better than me. Tremendous.
Well, I was going to play that while Tony was on, but I waited till now because he can't hear the clips. But that's something that actually came out before. So maybe technically it's not the lie of the day. It is the recycled lie of the day. This was a very contentious testimony, as you could hear. And Elizabeth Warren, who was talking over him. But what RFK Jr. was saying, that, you know, she questioned what Trump was saying in terms of a 600% reduction in drug prices or something like that. And he goes, well, there's two different ways that you can calculate percentages. No, there's not. No, there's not. What he's probably thinking of is, you know, somebody will talk about something as being a percentage increase or reduction in terms of, you know, where do you start with this? You know, do you want to, if you want to start with this number and go the other number, sometimes, you know, that works out a little bit differently, you know, so it's maybe, you know, if you say, well, it's a 50% increase, it might be a 30% decrease or something like that. But no, if you go, he gives the example of saying, well, if you got something that is $600 and you go down to $10, I think was the example that he gave. He says that's a 600% decrease. No, it's not. You can't have more than a 100% decrease. You can have more than a 100% increase, right? But you can't have more than a 100% decrease. You would have, if you go from 600 to 10, that is 99.4% reduction. Now, if you went the other way, if you went from 10 to 600, That is a 60-fold increase. That's a 6,000% increase. It's not a 600% increase. So none of this stuff adds up, if you will, the math from the Trump administration, which kind of gives us an insight when Trump says it. And that kind of gave us an insight as to how his casinos went bankrupt, right? Many people have said Vegas is a city that's built on the ignorance of mathematics. And maybe losing 6 casinos means that you are more ignorant than the consumers that are ignorant of mathematics and probability. But then RFK Jr. just dutifully reports it and perhaps sincerely believes it. Maybe he does sincerely believe that. Maybe that's why RFK Jr. was taken in by global warming, quote unquote, science, because global warming climate science, the climate MacGuffin, is based on that same kind of stupidity in terms of mathematics. So maybe we get an insight into both the background of RFK Jr. and Donald Trump when they tell us that to go from $600 to $10 is a 600% decrease. No, it isn't. And it just tells us what an idiocracy we live in, I think. But
maybe what's confusing Trump is he had more than a 100% decrease on all of his casinos. It's called bankruptcy. So therefore, it's everywhere.
That's right. Total liquidation. Yeah, everything must go. I want to get to some of the comments we got here. And we got a nice tip from Marty. Thank you so much, Marty. And he says 1 week to go. And we should focus more on that. I'll just tell you that Karen has been going back and forth between Florida this week, and we haven't picked up and updated this week. We were at 5/8 last week, and so we'll be getting an update to you about that soon. And but her mother is, I thought she was 93. She's actually 95. She's in very good shape. But she does need some assistance in traveling. But I think that based on this particular trip, though, Karen was kind of redundant. The airline took great care of her, and they'd meet her at the ticket place and put her in a wheelchair and put her on the plane. And first one on the plane, the last one's off. But still, they did a great job. Even brought her out to the curb and so forth. As long as she could get somebody to get her to the airport, I think the airline would take care of it in the future. So, but Karen has gone down to Florida, flew back with her, and then took her back down to Florida, and now she's flying back today. So things have been kind of turned upside down this last week. It's one of the reasons why the boys have been switching off through the show. But we also got a comment here. Thank you, Marty. I appreciate that. Real Octospook says, gold-backed blockchain? Who holds the gold for us? Yeah, and especially when you look at it as a gold-backed stablecoin. As Tony was talking about, the purpose of the stablecoin is to have the ability to freeze people's accounts and do all the rest of the stuff that we were concerned about with CBDC. That's why I say you can, don't fall for stablecoin. If you understand the problems with CBDC, those problems are still there. It's just that the digital currency is not run by a central bank. It's run by the crony capitalists around Donald Trump and people like Lucky Larry Lutnick. Real Jason Barker says the people who manipulate the market love volatility. That's right. That's how they steal other people's wealth. And I've got an example of that we're going to talk about coming up right in just a moment here. They also love inflation because it forces the everyday Joe to invest to try to keep up with it. And they transfer that stored wealth to themselves. It is the great taking. Absolutely the case. And again, Jason Barker, Knights of the Storm, their program, and they have their website, is a great repository of a lot of like-minded people who are focused on trying to do real research and real news and not just tell you fairy stories that are going to build your confirmation bias into it. These are some comments from before the interview, says Lance. Fearless Rose in the USA said, I said it when this war with Iran began. I'll say it again. This will be Trump's Waterloo. And he says it's been backed into a corner. Defeat and exile are imminent. Well, I certainly hope so. I said I think this is going to be worse for him than, and he's going to be the albatross around the neck of the Republican Party like Jimmy Carter was around the Democrat Party. Even more so. Jimmy Carter kind of inherited this Iranian situation. People don't want to talk about that. It actually started 70 some odd years ago, 1953, 73 years ago, not 47 years ago. And so he kind of inherited that. Everything blew up and blew back against the king that was put in there by the CIA, Mossad, with his repressive secret police. So that blew up under Carter. He didn't know what to do, of course. But Trump is the one who kicked all this stuff off. He did it for Israel. So, yeah, he deserves everything. The GOP deserves whatever they get. Unfortunately, what we're going to get is all of the gun control and the gender insanity and mutilation of minors and all the rest of the stuff. That's all going to come roaring back when the Democrats come in. They're going to wind up with large majorities in a lot of different places. And it is, that's going to be the flip side of this. We don't have any good alternatives. That's the bottom line. But I think it is important, when we look at some of these things, we can fight gun control at the local and state level. And we can fight the gender nonsense at the state and local level. What we can't do at the state and local levels, we can't get ourselves out of this war that Trump has put us in. That's why I say I think the most important thing is, regardless of the consequences, we have to get Trump out, and then we have to fight this other stuff at the local level. I think that's about the only option we've got. Be My Valentine says Willie Bergdorfer was injecting ticks with pathogens to see if they could survive and coexist together. Also, could be transmitted to people through bites, and he was one of the people that was involved in this program that I talked about that was there. Also said they imported ticks from Russia to survive our cold winters. Yeah, that's what we need, is more politics, right? Hi Boo says, my wife told me about a husband of a friend who just became allergic to meat all of a sudden. It is so bad that he can't even get cross-contamination without breaking out and using an EpiPen. Wow. Yeah, that is, like I said, that is by design. Again, I think we're going to find out this is another one of these federal bioweapons that are there and put out with tick bites and that type of thing. They've isolated some of this stuff to some ticks, and I think that this is a government project. They don't want us eating meat. So Steve Az says, didn't Bill Gates release millions of GMO mosquitoes in Zionist-occupied government of Florida? Yes, he did. And, of course...
and yet, we're supposed to believe this could never happen today. Well, it's literally happening today.
That's right. Absolutely is. I got to plug this thing in here. Real Octo Spook says the depopulation program continues in the background. There is no halting it now. The attack on Americans is food, fuel, water, air, financial, employment, disease, etc. We are encircled in their attacks. And of course, when they declare war on us, one of the key things that they want to do is control our communications and control our ability to move. And if they can't completely lock you down, which is really the goal, they've pointed that out. That's their 15-minute cities and their Agenda 2030 and all the rest of the stuff. That is their agenda, to lock you down where you can't move. But they also want to know when you move and where you move. And so that's a part of it. That's a part of enforcing the lockdown. But it is also a precursor to all that. And we're going to talk about that here in just a moment. In terms about Kash Patel, High Boost says if you worked for Trump, you would have to be loaded all the time, too. Well, he hires these people who have serious character flaws, because if he had somebody around him that was somebody who was grounded and based, even perhaps somebody with virtue, they wouldn't last too long, and they'd probably blow the whistle on him. So he likes to have people like that around him. Pisano Vante 1776 says the U.S. has lost military assets worth billions of dollars since the start of its war on Iran. That includes at least 24 American MQ-9 Reaper drones worth more than $3 billion alone. Yeah, and that's the interesting thing, isn't it? That they're able to shoot those things down, and quite regularly shoot them down. You would think those things would not be such an easy target. They want you to believe that they're fighting with people who don't have the ability to fight back. Nothing could be further from the truth. Patriot Girl says more jabs were just approved. They're constantly doing it. Let's get back into the news. We were talking, and I mentioned it a couple of times in the show today, the fact that this manipulation of the market has occurred yet again. This is reported by Crypto Rover on X. He said the Trump administration insider trading has happened yet again. Traders placed, and we could spell that two different ways, couldn't we? You could spell it with an I or with a, you could spell it the other way as well, as a stock trader, or you could say as a non-patriotic trader. Traders placed $430 million bet on an oil decline 15 minutes before Trump said he'd extend the Iran ceasefire on Tuesday. It's this 15-minute window again, right? Perhaps somebody in the Justice Department should investigate. Oh, no, wait, it's Trump's Justice Department. That's right. This is the third time this has happened this month. Same pattern over and over again. It's even the same amount of time. You know, they do it 15 minutes before. Massive trades placed just before Trump drops a bombshell, whether it's tariffs or whether it's policy reversals or whether it's his pronouncements about the war. But let's talk about the smart glasses. You know, I think it is an abomination for law enforcement to wear masks, to hide their faces, to not identify themselves. And yet it's going to get even worse. They're going to start wearing glasses even, so you can't see their eyes, but their eyes will be looking at you. And they'll be putting you into their database if you're not in it, and they will be cross-checking their database if you are already in it. So again, this is a government still creating and spreading diseases and calling it national security. This is the disease of tyranny, spying on us. And as we've always said, you know, this is a government, and we've seen this forever. Under national security, they say they have to know everything about you, but you're not allowed to know anything about them. And that's true of their agents now as well. They wear masks. They're going to wear glasses that'll completely hide their face. They will have no identification. As a matter of fact, we just had a law in California that was going to require these federal quote-unquote agents to have identification on them. You know, maybe their name on their uniform or something like that. That was just struck down by a federal court. So you're not allowed to know anything about them. But they're going to know everything about you with their new smart glasses. And this is a perfect metaphor for this police state that Trump is creating. And make no doubt, you need to understand that this is his Gestapo that is out there. So it's going to allow video recording. It'll allow a heads-up data display to do overlays to give them information so they can read that as they're looking at you. They'll be able to go through vast federal holdings of biometric data, from facial recognition to how you walk, your walking gait. And so they'll be able to identify people in real time. Because you have to understand, we are their slaves, we are their livestock, and we are their lab rats. You know, that's what we're talking about when we talk about these bioweapon programs and stuff. That's how they see us. We're livestock, slaves, and lab rats. These are smart glasses that will equip agents with real-time access to information and biometric identification capabilities in the field. And so, yeah, they'll be wearing masks and glasses, and they will be proactive glasses. So one person who is an attorney for the Department of Justice contacted, this is an article coming from Ken Klippenstein that was picked up by the Free Thought Project. They contacted him under condition of anonymity. Well, you're not going to have anonymity for too much longer. See, that's the other thing. They'll be able to track their leaks with people as well. They want to know everything that you do, everybody that you talk to, right? If you're a person of interest, if you've got somebody who's a reporter like Ken Klippenstein, they know that he's been contacted in the past by whistleblowers. You don't think they're going to track him? And they don't need to put a bug on him anymore, right? They can... they don't necessarily even need to do a Stingray approach. That's the program where they could kind of ping your phone as you're traveling and do a warrantless search on you that way. But no, this is going to be basically they've got the network of flock cameras that are not only license plate readers, but they will also do a unique identification of your vehicle. They'll identify certain idiosyncrasies of your vehicle. Maybe you've got a ding on one side or some flaw in the paint job or or something else. Maybe there's something that's unique about your car. They can do it that way as well as by the automated license plate readers. And so you got your car is constantly being surveilled. Your phone is constantly being surveilled. Now your face and the way that you walk and all the rest of the stuff is going to be surveilled by them as well.
And it also makes me think of that thing with the Bundys where Evan Bundy went on with that shady media guy, and he was trying to get him to say that he was a sovereign citizen, and he wasn't familiar with the term, but he's like, you're a sovereign citizen, right? Just because they knew that would be a big thing for law enforcement, that they would see him differently if they could get him to say that one thing once in an interview. They could put that everywhere. Now they could just label someone sovereign citizen or dangerous individual or whatever in their database. And now
that shady media character was Glenn Beck.
Yeah.
Who, by the way, is, they're burning their CIA sources like Alex and Glenn Beck. Glenn Beck has got a lawsuit that is going to be applied to him as well for something that they jumped the shark with. So, he and a reporter who works for him identified somebody as who worked for the CIA or something as being the January 6th bomber or whatever. So he's got a lawsuit down the pike that's coming after him. But yeah, you're exactly right. If they put that label of sovereign citizen on you, that's a huge red flag. I mean, you get pulled over if the car comes up as belonging to a sovereign citizen or something like that. They come up to your car with their guns, the safety's off their gun, basically ready to shoot you. And so that really was putting a target on Cliven Bundy. So they said this guy who was speaking under conditions of anonymity, who's an attorney for the Department of Justice, said these ice glasses, that's what they call them, it might be portrayed as seeking to identify illegal aliens on the streets. But the reality is that the push in this direction affects all Americans, particularly protesters. And again, we should not be surprised about this, right? It's going to come after people who are dissenters as well. I mean, you don't have to necessarily show up with a costume or a card or something to protest their policies. If you say something, your speech online or other places like that. But we know that they're watching that kind of stuff and identifying people. But this will be if you are in public. It'll be your physical. They already have all kinds of things to follow you online in cyberspace, but now in physical space, they'll be able to do this as well. The ice glasses are not only able to detect and with the help of AI match to suspects that are already in the database, but they can also secretly record people and add them to the new domestic watch lists. As they point out, when Google came out with this back in the 2010s, they called it Google Glass, and public didn't like that because they said, who gives you the right to film people as an individual? What gives you the right to film people and put it up? Well, legally, there's nothing that prohibits you from doing that if somebody is in public. But there was a lot of pushback against it, and people started calling the people who wore them glass holes. I guess we could call these ICE agents, now we call them ice holes. Nevertheless, it's biological, biographical, behavioral, contextual, reputational attributes are applied to people that they're looking at. All of a sudden, boom, boom, pops up and flags that for people, says that this person is a threat. The U.S. military has developed its own biometrically enabled watch list. And so this is, as Madison had warned us, the means of defense abroad will become instruments of tyranny at home. And here they are. We were warned. Meanwhile, in San Jose, the police department there in that location got very heavily into the flock cameras. And again, when you look at these, isn't it amazing the obsession, the insane obsession, and the criminal behavior of our government at the federal level, the state level, the local level, at every level? And whether you're talking about surveillance, or whether you're talking about bioweapons, and we're talking about the bioweapon programs earlier, it's just beggars belief. A normal person we're at risk with all this stuff because a normal person just can't imagine that there are people who would do stuff like this. You know, imagine that they're going to create diseased ticks and drop them from airplanes on people. Sounds like some kind of a plot from an absurd superhero movie. The supervillain would do something like that. Well, in San Jose, they've got a network of nearly 500 cameras that monitor people who are simply going about their daily lives all the time. We should be very concerned about this, as Harvey Silverglate pointed out. The average person commits 3 felonies a day because we have so many laws. And so they can use this against anybody. And we have seen the Trump administration do this as well. You know, just go back and look at some of the people, and regardless of what I'm not a fan, as Trump would say, of Letitia James, the New York State Attorney General, but or Lisa Cook. I don't have an opinion about her one way or the other. But he wanted her out of the Federal Reserve, and he wanted to get even with Letitia James, who had come against him. And so he had his guy at Housing and Urban Development at HUD do a deep dive on them with artificial intelligence and go through all their records and found some, basically what would amount to some process crimes. You got a home loan and you said it was going to be for your own personal use, and yet you didn't live in that. And you rented it out. Even if you rented it out to relatives, we're still going to come after you. This is the kind of thing that Stalin did. It is tyranny. You know, bring me the man and I'll find the crime. Well, Stalin didn't have artificial intelligence. He didn't have a massive database of everything that you've done in your life to find the crime. These guys do. We've never had tyrants have never had these kinds of tools. Tyranny is built into human nature. We've always had tyrants. What is concerning is they've never had these types of tools before. And so you got more than 1,000 San Jose Police Department employees are authorized to search the information from the flock cameras, but it is also available to all government agencies across California. As they said in the lawsuit, it is creepy and it is deeply intrusive surveillance system that violates the Fourth Amendment. The Institute of Justice, by the way, this is just one lawsuit that they have put out against these flock cameras. They are setting up lawsuits all across the country against this corporation that has made itself the handmaid of tyranny. So they said they've set up a situation that is ripe for abuse, and it is not just personal abuse, which they have seen this. You don't have to have any excuse. These people, as long as you're in the system and you have access to it, you can use it for whatever you want. And there have been a lot of cases where people have used this flock information as against people that they may have a personal vendetta against. Maybe it's an ex-spouse or something like that they want to find dirt on somebody they don't like. So it's ripe for individual abuse as well as institutional abuse. The plaintiffs are seeking a court order that would require the San Jose Police Department to delete or to block access to images and data collected by the cameras after 24 hours, unless it has a specific warrant based on probable cause. Now, what the San Jose Police Department was doing, they were paying $300 per camera to store this stuff for a year. By default, what Flock does is store it for a month. And what they want from this lawsuit is they want this stuff, the data, to go away after 24 hours. What we really want to do is we want the cameras to go away. Thousands of government employees across California have access to this massive trove. It's been accessed 2.5 million times in the last 6 months of 2025, an average of 15,000 searches per day. And so, again, in addition to the license plate readers, it identifies the idiosyncrasies of your car. They said they can analyze patterns of movement, of your movement. It can go through and create a vehicle journey map. It shows everywhere the car has been seen. They can do lists of vehicles that have been visited, multiple locations of interest. They can see if you have visited and been in contact with somebody else that is of interest. So they make hops with this stuff as well. And they can predict the future route that a vehicle might take. This is what Zbigniew Brzezinski was writing about in the 70s in his book, Between Two Ages. He said, we're coming up into a technocratic age. That's what he called the techno-tyranny that we're looking at right now, this kind of techno-fascism. And he said, we'll be able to see everything that everybody is doing, and we'll be able to predict what they're going to do. As a matter of fact, they were talking about anticipatory intelligence, that kind of AI, long before they were talking about artificial intelligence. So one of the key things, this all focuses into geospatial intelligence. And one of the things that the geospatial intelligence community was always talking about was mapping people by their political and religious beliefs. Now, those are not crimes, but they will be treated as crimes. So again, if you have personal animus towards somebody, an ex-partner or something, you can go after them, as well as monitoring protesters. You can even track down a woman who reportedly had an abortion. Or you can track down people who have protested abortions, right? It cuts every way, and everyone should be concerned about this regardless. That's why I say when they justify these nullifications of the Bill of Rights because it involves people who are here illegally, understand that is a crime, right? It's just one type of crime. The worst crime, though, is to take away our human rights, because these are rights that, you know, throughout the Bill of Rights, it doesn't say citizen, it says person. Because if you're going to dehumanize people and say, sorry, you don't have any rights because you have committed this crime over here, which is not a felony or anything like that. It is if you will, a process crime or something. It's like a speeding ticket or something. And if you take away the welfare magnet and they're not able to get any money, that really is the way it ought to be viewed. You know, just cut off the welfare money, cut off the welfare magnet, and, you know, coming into the country illegally ought to be treated like a speeding ticket. And I say that as somebody who thinks the speeding tickets ought to go away. I think you would still have this as a crime, even though I would take the speeding tickets away. By the way, I just saw this morning that talking about process crimes and making crimes of things that shouldn't be crimes, they just moved marijuana, Trump did, by executive order, of course. That's the way everything is done in a monarchy. By executive order, he has now moved marijuana from a Schedule I drug, which says that it has no medical use. He's now moved that to a Schedule III drug. That's something that he's doing for political purposes. Frankly, he could have done it a long time ago. You had a lot of even Republicans were saying, you know, why are we doing this? We know that it has medical use. We've had it legalized for medical use in the majority of the states. Many of them have now legalized it for recreational use, but I think it's something like 40 states have legalized it for medical use. And so it makes no sense to have it in this Schedule I, because Schedule I is for drugs that have no medical use. When I was in Texas, I've talked about this before, and there was a state representative there, and I'm trying to think of his name now. I've forgotten his name. His first name is David Simpson. And he was the guy who fought against the TSA. He brought up the bill that was going to stop the naked body scanners and the pat-downs and do it for kids especially. And it passed unanimously in the House. They shut it down in the Senate by using the lieutenant governor, who was a former CIA guy. He'd been set up in the oil business and become very, very wealthy. He spent more money to become lieutenant governor than anybody ever had up to that point for state office. But anyway, it was shut down. But David Simpson was the guy who brought that in. I interviewed him multiple times, and he was a straight up guy, really was. And he brought up a bill that said, let's just remove the word marijuana from the entire Texas criminal code. He said, this is something natural that God created. The government should not be regulating this. I absolutely agreed with him on it. Now, I would not recommend that you use it, except perhaps as medicine. There have been some cases, and he was able to, even though Texas never recognized medical marijuana, he was able to get an exemption for parents who had children who'd been vaccine damaged, and they had uncontrollable seizures. The only thing that would stop it was marijuana use. And he said it's wrong for us to threaten to lock up these parents and take the kids away from them for that. And he was able to get that through. He was a really good guy. But that's the way I feel about it. Just understand the schedule was set up by the United Nations. The war on drugs was not created by Richard Nixon. It was created by the UN. And they gave the schedule, the 4 different categories. They gave that to Richard Nixon, and he adopted it and called it his own. But basically, they handed it in to him. He signed it, his homework, and turned it in. That tells you a lot about these people, doesn't it? And so that is your war on drugs and prohibition. Doesn't work, never has worked, never will work for anything, not just for drugs. Well, as I said before, you had Howard Lutnick go on again to talk about tariffs, and he was hammered about his connection with Jeffrey Epstein by a couple of senators when he went before them, and they said, "You refuse to answer our questions, our follow-up questions." And he told them, "Well, I'm not going to talk about that today. I'm here to talk about economic stuff, but I'll be going to talk to the House, and if you got any questions, give them to them, and I'll tell them when I show up." So, yeah, he's not too responsive to this. But it has been reported by Reuters that James Comer, the House Oversight Committee chair, a Republican, James Comer, has said that some members are open to Trump pardoning Ghislaine Maxwell. Who would those members be? I wonder which political party they're with. I think they're all going to be Republicans, and it might be him, right? So they would like to have her pardoned if they can get her to cooperate and give them some information, right?
Release the pardon list.
Yeah, it's all a secret. Who knows? Meanwhile, we have the Southern Poverty Law Center. This is one thing that I thought was good, because I've been a target of theirs in the past. Working at InfoWars, they put us all on their hate group watch list and everything. I did a report on them when they did that as well. I said, well, let's take a look at the background of the Southern Poverty Law Center. This was, and just to recap what I said in that report, I called it the prophets of hate. They're always predicting, oh, you're a hate group and you're going to cause people to do this and do that. And so I said, well, they're not prophets in the sense that they're predicting the future. This is simply about their PROFITS. And it began, Morris Deese, the guy who created that, he began his career by defending the Ku Klux Klan. The guys that stopped the civil rights marchers in Birmingham, Alabama, and burned their bus and beat the protesters with sticks and everything, those guys, those Ku Klux Klan guys, their defense attorney was Morris Deese. He made a lot of money defending the Ku Klux Klan. As I pointed out in the report, the amount of money that he made, which doesn't sound like a lot of money today, but it was at the time more than what the median house price was. So he got paid essentially, more than it would have taken for him to buy a new home. So he made a lot of money with that, and that was his only involvement in civil rights. And then he got out of being a lawyer and he went into multi-level media marketing, right? He had mailing lists and stuff like that he did. He didn't get back into politics until the time of Jimmy Carter. And he went to the Democrats and he said, I've got this very successful marketing company, does mailing lists and things like that. I will do all that for the Democrats for free. All I want from you in terms of payment is give me the Democrat Party's mailing list. And that became the basis, after that campaign was over, that became the basis for the Southern Poverty Law Center. So as I pointed out, this guy who made his entire career about coming after the Ku Klux Klan, his only involvement with the Ku Klux Klan was to defend them. And his only involvement in the civil rights movement was to basically make a profit off of it. And then he got out of it completely until he got back in, until he could make another profit off of it, doing the opposite, opposing them. But it turns out that he wasn't opposing them all that much. The Southern Poverty Law Center was actually doing what the FBI typically does. Remember, Judge Napolitano did a great report on that years ago. He said, what if it were true that blah, 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 and he would say, and he would always do that kind of like a what if the FBI is actually the one organizing all these different things? What if the FBI is planning this and finding patsies and giving them the means to do this and then busting it at the last minute, just like, like the arsonist fireman or something like that. Well, that turns out that's what the Southern Poverty Law Center is doing. And we've just had the Trump administration and this new acting attorney general, Blanche, who has just got an indictment against the Southern Poverty Law Center because they were paying big bucks to some people who were Ku Klux Klan. So we've gone from the Ku Klux Klan hiring Morris Dees then to defend them during the Civil Rights Movement. And then he comes back with the Southern Poverty Law Center to scare everybody about the Ku Klux Klan. And that turns out the Southern Poverty Law Center was actually paying the Ku Klux Klan to create a threat that they could then expose. And of course, that's the type of thing that the FBI does all the time. And if you go back about a decade or so ago, there was the big issue as we were being put on the list of radical hatred people by the Southern Poverty Law Center. They were giving that information to the FBI, and there was a lot of pushback against that. So the FBI said, well, we're not going to use the Southern Poverty Law Center as a source for this stuff. I mean, they fingered people like the Family Research Council and things like that, a Christian organization. They were just off the charts. It's the same way that you've got the Zionist organizations and AIPAC are out there pointing at people and calling everybody anti-Semites and racists because they oppose Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli government's policies and their wars. So it was always fake. But then there's another dimension of this, and that is the Southern Poverty Law Center was even flagged by a lot of liberal watch groups who agreed with their policies. They didn't like they said this is one of the worst causes you could give to because they keep almost all the money. And not only that, but they're stashing it offshore in offshore bank accounts, hundreds of millions of dollars. So they're not using this for the cases for what they say they're going to use it for. And not only that, but they're putting it offshore that had all the hallmarks of a criminal enterprise, even for the leftists who are looking at this. But the bottom line is that they've now gotten an indictment. Here's some dollar figures for what they were doing. From 2014 to 2023, it's alleged that the Southern Poverty Law Center, this is what they're indicted for. So it's an allegation, but they've gotten a grand jury indictment. They've not been convicted, so that's why we say alleged. But the Southern Poverty Law Center paid at least $3 million to at least 8 informants who were affiliated with the Ku Klux Klan. I mean, when you look at this stuff, the Ku Klux Klan now at this point is either going to be FBI agents or Southern Poverty Law Center run or something like that. It's just a trap for people. Again, they said the Southern Poverty Law Center is manufacturing racism in order to justify its existence, just like AIPAC, just like the FBI. And yet this is Kash Patel standing there next to Todd Blanche saying, yeah, we caught these guys. It's like, yeah, well, that's what you do all the time anyway, isn't it? One of their paid informants was a member of the leadership group that planned the Unite the Right protest in Charlottesville, Virginia. Remember that? How the left really ran with that.
I guess I should apologize. It turns out it wasn't all feds. Some of them were privately employed.
That's right. Yeah, some of it was Southern Poverty Law Center, which has really been a revolving door between these organizations. So after they paid members of these organizations and groups, then it created reports to people saying, look at this, look at what we found, and we're going to come after them and everything. Yet it was fraudulent, and they said they lied to their donors. They vowed to dismantle violent extremist groups, and yet they actually turned around and paid the leaders of these very extremist groups, even utilizing the funds to have these groups facilitate the commission of state and federal crimes. So that's what the liberals who were giving money to the Southern Poverty Law Center were doing. They were giving them money, and then the SPLC was paying the Ku Klux Klan people. By the way, and this is Kash Patel who's saying this. He said, that's illegal. But that's what the FBI has been doing as well. So the Biden administration, and there was an investigation already in the Southern Poverty Law Center, and the Biden administration shut it down. So they owned it as well. And this is just a revolving door. More of the same, isn't it? So they were personally asked by the Assistant Attorney General for the Civil Rights Division of the Biden Department of Justice to flag civil rights matters for the department. This is after they had done it for the FBI and after it had been stopped when people made an issue of it. As one person, though, defending this, of course, is a Democrat from New York, Daniel Goldman. He said, the Department of Justice uses paid informants all the time. That's what I was just saying, right? It's a standard operating procedure for the FBI and for the DOJ. So why is it okay for them, but not for the Southern Poverty Law Center, he said. The bottom line is this is more of this whataboutism, more of this moral relativism. It's wrong when either one of them does it. But because they're able to, the Department of Justice or the Biden administration gets away with it, now, everybody gets to get a free pass with all this stuff. As one person said, linking groups like Turning Point USA, my employer, to actual violent actors by putting them all on the same list was the political purpose. And again, think about the surveillance state that we were talking about. That's where this stuff is really going. Well, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, this was recommended to me by a listener, and I thought it was an excellent piece. John Whitehead from the Rutherford Institute. I read his articles all the time and report them. I really should take a look at his stuff. But this is one of the best ones that he's ever written, I think. And he talks about this. The Pentagon has turned the Sermon on the Mount into a war manual. And he is spot on with this analysis. And by the way, I just have to say that there is a certain symmetry and similarity, isn't there, between the Christian nationalists and the Zionists, isn't there? These are people who fundamentally worship the state in a kind of idolatry, and very dangerous people, willing to kill because they now have added a thin veneer of religious zealotry to their statism. And these two different groups, the Zionists as well as the Christian nationalists, both do that. And it's interesting to see that you have a lot of the same people like Pete Hegseth, who are both Christian nationalists and Zionists at the same time. One of them is in support, making an idol of the American government. The other one is making an idol of the Israeli government. So we're going to talk about that when we come back. We'll be right back.
In a world of deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. You're listening to The David Knight Show.
APS Radio delivers multiple channels of music right to your mobile device. Get the APS Radio app today and listen wherever you go.
And again, we're going to go a little bit longer with this because I do want to cover this. And I've got some comments here. I don't want to miss these. Real Jason Barker says, I mentioned this before when people were saying that I should have body cams. They already have the recording glasses, and it was reported on. Yeah, but they're getting ready to roll this out in a big way and connect it with all these different databases. And that's one of the key things. We've had in the past, they don't like what they call the data being siloed. In other words, you had this organization over here, and they're collecting information, but they're not supposed to share it in general with all these other departments out there. It should be compartmentalized, but now they want to cross-reference it with everybody. That's the key thing. Georgia Boy 1142 says the two biggest supply chain incidents we have seen in history were brought to us under Trump. Yay, MAGA. Say that like a sheep. Yeah, that's absolutely true. He sees what he wants, and they see what they want. They want to just follow him. And he goes for it like a toddler, and he doesn't know that there's going to be any consequences for the rest of the stuff either. Well, again, how the Pentagon turned the Sermon on the Mount into a war manual. This is coming from John Whitehead of the Rutherford Institute. He says, Christian nationalism is a complete distortion and a rewriting of the gospel and teaching of Jesus. And as I said before, it really is kind of a cousin of Zionism. Both of these are worship of the state. and for focusing on the secular rather than the eternal. Christ said, "My kingdom is not of this world," and yet these people want to make Jesus the handmaid of their national idolatry, whether it's the U.S. or whether it's Israel. So he begins with two different quotes, one of them by Pete Hegseth and the other one by Jesus, to see how they line up. Jesus said, "Blessed are the merciful, for they shall be shown mercy. And blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God." But Pete Hegseth says, "We negotiate with bombs. We show no mercy to our enemies." The language of modern government is the language of empire. And just as a reminder, when I went through the manifesto from Alex Karp yesterday, the CEO of Palantir, CEO and co-founder of it, everything that he talked about was about empire. And boy, he is a lot scarier even than Pete Hegseth, because he's a lot smarter than Pete Hegseth. It is the language of domination, of retaliation, of conquest, and of control. This is what Hegseth and Alex Karp have in common. Of enemies to be crushed, of nations to be subdued, of dissenters to be silenced. Under the Trump regime, the language of empire has also been imbued with a religious fervor that recasts Jesus Christ not as a peacemaker, but as a mascot for power, conquest, and control. War has been dressed up as patriotism, wrapped in scripture, called righteous, marketed as peace through strength. This is not a holy war. It is a political war, dressed up as if it were holy. And I have to add, and it's not justified, and it's not justifiable either. Certainly is not holy. Participants invoking God while demanding loyalty that bears no resemblance to the teachings of Jesus Christ. Jesus said, "Love your enemies." The government says, "Destroy them." Jesus said, "Blessed are the peacemakers." The government says, "Blessed are the war makers." Jesus said, "Whatever you did for the least of these, you did for us." But the government cages the poor, criminalizes the homeless, and bombs the foreigner, calling it security. This is not a misunderstanding of Christianity, says John Whitehead. It is a deliberate rewriting of it, an inversion of it. In the same way that these people rewrite and invert the Constitution, they do the same thing to the teachings of Christ. Consider the prayer offered by War Pete. Let every round find its mark. Give overwhelming violence of action against those who deserve no mercy. Remember, blessed are the peacemakers, and to those who are merciful, they will be shown mercy. The bottom line is, Pete, as a Christian, you should understand, none of us deserve mercy. That's why it's called mercy, because we don't deserve that. We ask these things, he said, continuing on with his prayer. He's going to pray exactly the opposite of what the Lord Jesus Christ said. And he's going to then end it. We pray this in the mighty and the powerful name of Jesus Christ. Just amazing to see this guy. This is the guy talking about showing no mercy. This is the guy who criminally attacked people that were not a threat to him. This kind of aggression that we saw in Venezuela, they then extended it to Iran. They machine gunned people that were shipwrecked. And then that's how they began the action in Venezuela. First they attacked people that were not attacking them, that were not a threat to them. That is criminal, and an undeclared war as well. But that part of it was also very criminal against international law. Then they didn't get everybody, so they circled back around and murder the people who were shipwrecked, doubling down on their war crimes. They began this war of aggression with Iran by attacking a school full of young girls. No mercy, spoken in the name of the Prince of Peace. This is not faith, this is blasphemy, baptized in nationalism. the turning of the Sermon of the Mount into a war manual. It's an attempt to recast modern warfare as a holy war, sanctioned by God, justified by faith, beyond moral reproach. Yeah, God is on our side. As I said before, that is not the question that a man of God asks, right? It was Moses who said, who's on the Lord's side? Right? He didn't say who's on my, God is on our side. He said, who's on the Lord's side? They do this because they know this war is unjust and unjustifiable. So they have to give it a veneer of morality. So you grab Jesus and you use him. This is why when you look at this kind of stuff, this is, to my opinion, it's far worse than what Trump did with his meme stuff. He's still using Jesus, but he's using him in a way to pervert this. And it's what they always do. They called it the Patriot Act when they created Homeland Security and began the police state that we're now seeing metastasize like a cancer. As Whitehead said, there's a difference between religious freedom and religious indoctrination. There is a difference between private belief and state-sponsored theology. When government officials invoke God to justify violence, when military power is cloaked in religious language, when prayer becomes a tool of state policy, we're no longer dealing with freedom of religion. We are staring at the early stages of religious establishment. When a government begins to speak in the language of divine mandate, and that is the thing we always have to be concerned about. As I've said before, if you're going to merge church and state together, as we've seen so many times in history, what happens is the state becomes the church. The religion is pushed out of the way. That is clearly what is happening in the Trump administration. It's clearly what's happening with War Pete. As he was being executed, wrongly accused, beaten, and nailed to a cross, writes Whitehead, Jesus did not call down vengeance. He prayed, Father, forgive them. Forgive them, not revenge, not retaliation, not overwhelming violence, not no mercy, as Pete Hegseth prays. Yet today we are told that violence brings peace, that dominion ensures security, and that revenge is strength. We could just sum this up by saying war is peace, because that is the true motto of this Orwellian Trump government. It contradicts everything that Jesus stood for, everything that Christianity is supposed to stand for. What we're witnessing here is not Christian nationalism. It's not Christianity at all. Christian nationalism is a counterfeit religion that wraps political power in religious language and calls it holy. The same thing that Zionism does. Mark Lewis Taylor warned the true power of Jesus lies in his ability to critique empire, not to crown empire. Christians are not called to identify with power. We are called to speak truth to power, even if it comes at a great cost. Peter Weiner writes in The Atlantic, he says, much of today's evangelical world sees Trump's viciousness not as a vice, but as a virtue, so long as it is employed against those they perceive as their enemies, against those whom they resent, and for those whom they have a seething hatred. This is so true. He says, today's evangelical church, writes Whitehead, in America has opted to replace Jesus with a coarse, vindictive, political savior in the form of Trump. The same man who spitefully relished the deaths of political opponents, from John McCain and Rob Reiner to Bob Mueller. As Brett Stevens pointed out in the New York Times, he said, good people and good nations do not stomp on the grief of others. Politics is meant to end at the gravesite. That's not just some social nicety. It is a foundational taboo that any civilized society must enforce. Why is that? Well, he points out that if you don't leave it at that point, right, if you're going to pursue it to the extremes that Donald Trump does, and that's just one example of how this guy can't let anything go. If you do that, what you wind up with is a blood feud. We can see what that looks like when we look at the Middle East, right? So he says, if you you have to prevent transient personal differences from becoming generational blood feuds. That is where history will record is the deepest damage for the Trump presidency was done. The damage that cuts deeper than even the financial, legal, or institutional damage that Donald Trump has done. And that is the hatred and the blood feud that he brings to this. Whitehead said this is egomaniacal, bloviating demagogue has become the face of today's evangelical movement. That this has happened underscores the profound disconnect between what Christianity should be and what it has become in the American police state. The same Christians wholeheartedly supported Trump's policies rooted in cruelty, deception, violence, and vengeance will proudly display their crosses, flood social media with Bible verses, and loudly proclaim that Christ is the Prince of Peace. That contradiction, celebrating leaders who lie, cheat, dehumanize, and kill, as long as the leaders claim to be on God's side, speaks louder than any sermon. This is not new. Power has always sought to co-opt religion. Politicians court pastors, campaigns mimic revivals, prayer rallies double as political launches, faith becomes a voting bloc, scripture becomes a talking point. Yet there's always a price to be paid for proximity to power. Yeah, just look at Billy and Franklin Graham. I mean, these are guys that always wanted a seat at the table. And you wind up at the end of his life, as he was getting older, Billy Graham just refuted what Christ said about Jesus being the only way. He said, no, there's a wideness in God's mercy, and you don't have to come to him through Christ. That's how he ended up in his ministry. And you can kind of see the same thing from Franklin Graham as well. Franklin Graham is out there making excuses for Trump and his meme. Well, I think he didn't mean anything by it, really. It's like, no, but what you are doing in terms of this Christian nationalism is even worse. And it's not just Franklin Graham. So as he pointed out, Roman crucifixion was not just an execution. It was a warning meant to intimidate. That this is what's going to happen to people who refuse to submit. And if you look at what Trump is doing, everything that he's doing is of that same issue. I'm going to go over the top, and I'm going to come after Wall Street Journal with a $10 billion lawsuit as a warning to anybody that you better not cross me or else. So again, as I point out, Franklin Graham says Trump would not knowingly depict himself as Jesus Christ. Yeah. Well, give me a break. We have seen this over and over again. And I'm really sick of the excuses being made and the denials being made. Oh, we don't worship him. We just make golden idols of him and golden statues and that type of thing. So I guess it was over the weekend, was it? We had America Reads the Bible event. It began on Saturday evening, and it's still going on. It's running for a week, I guess. And so as part of this, they had Trump come in and read a passage from the Bible. No, it was not Ezekiel 25:17. It wasn't the Pulp Fiction transliteration, I should say, of this thing. No, instead it was the passage from 2 Chronicles that you hear people talking about all the time. If my people who are called by my name, what name would that be? Christ? Christians who are called by my name? And so, but he didn't have any comments. I looked at to see if maybe he was going to come up with some kind of a cute comment about that, but he just read it as straight as he could, which I guess is kind of difficult for him. He doesn't like to stick to a script anymore, but it was that passage. It's God's not talking about Israel. He's talking about people of faith in him, whether it was Israel in ancient times or whether it's the Christians today. It's the people, God's people are those who have faith in him. And it's kind of interesting to me as well, because I'll see a lot of people who understand that in this particular passage. They'll use that passage and say, if Christians in America would just cry out to God, we're the ones who call by his name. And yet the same people come back around and say, no, he's just, God's people are, his chosen people are Israel. As a matter of fact, you've got these people who are as secular as they can get. People like Ben Shapiro, people like Chuck Schumer. And you look at Ben Shapiro, he goes on with Joe Rogan, and Joe Rogan says, so did Moses part the Red Sea? Oh, no, we don't believe any of that. That's just a fable. No, but what I believe is that that land was given to us, not as a leasehold, but it was given to us forever. Well, that was not in the Bible either. So if you don't believe the part about opening the Red Sea so people could cross through, maybe you don't believe the part where God said, I'm going to take you off of my land if you do not follow me. But you got Chuck Schumer, who lays out for us what Jewish, I guess we could say, instead of Christian nationalism, you got Judaic nationalism. That's what Zionism is. He lays out for people speaking at AIPAC, what the problem is, and he's talking about people who don't believe the Torah.
The view of Palestinians is simple. Well, the Europeans treated the Jews badly, culminating in the Holocaust, and they gave them our land as compensation. Of course, we say it's our land. The Torah says it, but they don't believe in the Torah. So that's the reason
Neither do you.
There is not peace. They invent other
How about
reasons,
the don't kill, don't steal part? You believe in that?
the Jewish state, and that is why we in America must stand strong with Israel through thick and thin. We must, because that is the reason, not any of these other false shibboleths, why there is not peace in the Middle East. Too many people don't understand that here in America.
Oh, yeah. That's what it comes down to. It comes down to his shibboleth. God gave us that land, and he took it away, too. He promised he would take it away, and he did take it away. Well, it's not just the right that's doing this with Christian nationalism, with Israeli nationalism, or Jewish nationalism, I should say, but it's also the left. They've also got their own idols as well. And a good example of this is this guy that the left has found as their new pastor, this Tallarico character who's running for Senate in Texas. Listen to what he has to say. Here's some clips and a response to it.
Is God a transgender feminist?
Most Christians believe that God is beyond gender.
The Bible sometimes describes God as a female, calling her Sophia.
God is non-binary.
Jesus Christ himself was a radical feminist.
Absolutely not. A recent Fox News article had this headline: Texas Democratic Senate nominee James Tallarico doubles down on God being beyond gender comments.
While it's maybe provocative politically, I don't think it's controversial theologically. Most Christians...
You might want to go with God's preferred pronouns. How about that?
Quote Galatians 3:28.
The Apostle Paul, in his letter to the Galatians, says that in Christ there is neither male nor female. So if you have a problem with what I said, don't take it up with me, take it up with the Apostle Paul.
You're saying it doesn't make a distinction between followers who are male and female.
God is non-binary, he's beyond gender. And sometimes people use those passages in the Bible where we read, for instance, in Isaiah 66:13, as a mother comforts her child, and so, I will comfort you, God says. Or in Matthew 23:37, where it talks about how often have I longed to gather your children together like a mother hen gathers its chicks. And people have tried to use that to say, then God is female, if you take those verses.
Did they teach you in Sunday school that the Bible sometimes describes God as a female, calling her Sophia?
What does the Bible say, first of all, about...
The Bible doesn't refer to Sophia anywhere.
Gender?
Well, the Bible says God is a spirit, and those who worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. And the truth about God is in the Bible. And of course, there are a few places where it uses that imagery of God mothering. But even in the verse in Matthew, you want to say God is a mother chick. She's a chicken. But the Bible also says the Lord is my rock and my fortress. That's not describing God in his literal essence.
He's not biological like we are.
Right. And but the majority of the time, God refers to himself with male pronouns or images. He is the king. He is the judge. He is the father of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And so that is the primary image. And these other expressions of fortress or rock or chicken or mother.
They're sort of analogies, aren't they?
They're analogies, and they're just bringing out one aspect of God's attributes, but they're not saying that God is non-binary. And the fact is, God created a binary world. He created male and female humans, and virtually all of biology is binary, male and female, except for single-celled creatures that reproduce by division.
And God stepped into history in the person of his son, Jesus, a male.
And he pictures the church is the bride of Christ. So Jesus is the husband in that image, in that analogy.
The bridegroom.
Right.
Which is male.
Right.
And when Jesus taught us to pray, he said, "Our Father."
Exactly.
There's no "our mother."
Yep.
So yeah, it's important to do this because when we look at James Tallarico, this guy is so similar to Pete Hegseth. Both of them want to twist the Bible and Scripture to back up whatever it is that they want. But here's somebody who's a bit different, who's gone even further than that. This is a woman who calls herself a bishop. She's with the United Church of Christ. That's very different than the Church of Christ. The United Church of Christ has been a leader in terms of trying to suppress the free exercise of religion everywhere. And now she wants to rip out the pages of the Bible that she doesn't agree with. Typically, they just twist them and turn them upside down. She wants to rip them out. She absolutely hates the Bible. Yvette Flunder, so-called senior pastor at the United Church of Christ in California, she said, we need to have a third testament because I don't like these two that God has given us. And she said, as one person pointed out, she is an extremist, even in a community of extremists who already have found twisted support for LGBT and for abortion, for racism, for all these other things. And like Tallarico, twisting it, but she wants to go further than that. She is avowed what she calls a womanist. She's a proponent of liberation theology, which, folks, is just Marxism. She is also gay married to another woman in a same-sex marriage. Again, that's not marriage, not defined by God that way. She said, I'm of the opinion that we need a third testament because the Bible has become so problematic. Yeah, it's a big problem for her, isn't it? She said, it's got things like, let the women keep silent in churches. If they have any questions, let them ask their husband at home. She doesn't ask what that means. Instead, she just takes exception. She said, my whole heart, I trust God with my whole heart. I wake up in the morning talking to God and God talking to me, but I'm completely frustrated with the text that speaks to the kind of vitriolic God that makes those kinds of things, those kinds of statements. So she wants to create her own God. You were going to say something, Lance?
Yeah, it's the first time I've seen a female pastor honest about what the Bible says about female pastors. She just says, okay, let's just write a new Bible.
She knows what she's doing, yeah. As a matter of fact, when I looked at this, I thought, this is a new category. Instead of just twisting it and turning it upside down, they want to rip it out. And this is actually even worse than what Satan did, right? In the Garden of Eden, he says to Eve, he says, hath God not said this? He kind of twists it. And even when Christ is being tempted, same type of thing, Satan says, doesn't Scripture say this? And Jesus, what does he say? He says, no, Scripture says this, right? So this is the way you understand it, And so this woman takes it to a completely different extreme. Where is this all headed, right? This is important because they're going to shut down what we have to say. Good example of this is in the UK. You've got a retired pastor who is facing jail for preaching John 3:16 near a hospital. Because this is a hospital that was doing abortions, they have their own version of the FACE Act. We've seen people in the UK, one woman showed up and she said, coercion is a crime, but I'm just here to talk if you want to. Only if you want to. She sold a sign like that. So she gets arrested for that. We've had another woman who has been arrested now 3 times for praying silently. She's just standing near an abortion clinic and not moving. So the police come up and said, are you praying? Said, yes, I'm praying silently. Oh, well, you're under arrest then, right? And she has been arrested 3 times, and at least 2 times, maybe all 3 times have been heard yet. They have shut this down in the courts, but the police keep coming after her. And so this is a 77-year-old retired pastor. He is close to this hospital that is doing abortions. He doesn't say anything about abortion. He doesn't have any artwork about abortion. He shows up and he starts singing some songs and stuff like that. And then he starts talking about John 3:16, which is, the passage that, everybody throws that out. You got, the football player? What was his name? Won the Heisman Trophy. Anyway, he puts John 3:16 under his eyes. And Tebow. You can tell I don't follow football too closely. Anyway, this guy was singing with a ukulele. Maybe that should be a crime. I don't know. But anyway, then he told his life story, and then he started preaching John 3:16. The police body camera shows him saying that, and the cop comes up and he says, this is a safe access zone, and you got to stop preaching. And then he tells Johnston, who's the name of the pastor there, and his associates, he says it's illegal to film in a safe area zone, and they've got to stop, despite the legislation not prohibiting filming in these areas. Again, the police will come up and make up these laws. And so he politely tells the officer he's not violating the law because he did not mention abortion in his sermon, and he refuses to leave. This prompts the officer to issue a warning to him that the, quote, police may remove you, and if you resist, you will be removed and liable to prosecution. He still stood his ground. He said, here's my personal information, and I accept that I might receive a summons in the mail. Thank you for being so courteous, he said. And so that is what they did do. They did not arrest him and carry him off, which is what they would do in America. They're not going to be courteous in America. But I think it's interesting because although they don't have an equivalent to the FACE Act, just understand that when we come back to this Christian nationalism stuff of Pete Hegseth and his church, you saw these guys, because they didn't like what Pete Hegseth was saying, you had Don Lemon and a bunch of people show up and disrupt their worship service. And now the pastors of that church are demanding that the FACE Act be used against Don Lemon and these disruptors. And I think that's significant because what these people are doing in terms of praying or preaching outside of abortion clinics, they're actually trying to save lives and actually trying to save souls that are out there. But these people who want to play church, they don't want to get involved in any of this kind of stuff. They're more than happy to be bought off with this FACE Act. I never realized that this abominable FACE Act, which violates both freedom of speech and the free expression of religion, I never realized, as well as peaceful protests, I never realized that it had two parts to it. One part was you can't get close to an abortion clinic, and that's really the title of it, right? Free access to clinics or something like that was what it was about. But the second part of it that they threw out there for the compromisers was to promise that if they didn't oppose this thing, that they would punish the people like Don Lemon and others who might interrupt their worship service. And they're more than willing to make that compromise, which tells you a lot about the Christian nationalist, doesn't it? I think it's absolutely disgusting. So that's where we are. I've gone over quite a bit. I've gone over a half hour here. But I wanted to cover those things. And because that, folks, is really what is the most important thing. All the rest of the stuff that we look at, all of the evil, the police state, the surveillance state, the bioweapons that they're unleashing on us, using us as experimental lab rats, all of that is downstream from your worldview, from how you view God and Christ. All of that is downstream. So we'll stop it at that point. Go ahead and play us out, Lance. The common man. They created Common Core to dumb down our children. They created Common Pass to track and control us. Their Commons Project to make sure the commoners own nothing. And the communist future. They see the common man as simple, unsophisticated, ordinary. But each of us has worth and dignity, created in the image of God. That is what we have in common. That is what they want to take away. Their most powerful weapons are isolation, deception, intimidation. They desire to know everything about us while they hide everything from us. It's time to turn that around and expose what they want to hide. Please share the information and links you'll find at thedavidknightshow.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. If you can't support us financially, please keep us in your prayers. thedavidknightshow.com.